Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 172 of the Assorted Calibers podcast, the Second Amendment podcast that is a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd, and with me, as always, is the evil villain, Aaron Paulette. How are you doing, Aaron?
Jeez, I played a villain one time on City of Heroes.
I mean, you're probably still playing a video in City of Heroes right now.
No. I logged out of that because otherwise I wouldn't contribute anything to this conversation.
See, so she is in fact a hero. I was only jesting.
You're damn right I'm a hero. It's why you've survived so long. If I were truly villainous, this would be the Aaron Paulette Show, featuring some guy in a gimp suit.
If the Dread Pirate Roberts really was a Dread Pirate, he would have killed Wesley in the morning.
So, that's how I'm doing. How are you doing, Weer'd?
A little bit better than that.
I mean, not a particularly high bar to cross, but
No.
do tell.
I got some good news from the town. There was a recent there's a computer rail track that runs through my town, and it's very nice to have. It's a fast way for me to go into Boston, but at the same time, the government found that one of our crossings did not meet code. And they shut it down for a long ass time, and then turned around, and now they have, and now they had opened it up, and now the trains are blowing their whistles whenever they go through town. And let's just say the city council met just tonight, and they were like, "Yeah, we didn't really think that it was going to be quite that bad." And so they just voted to close the intersection again until the government signs off on it. Which, I mean, of course, libertarian me is one of those like, why is the government so concerned? The gates go down, the lights come on. If someone wants to drive their train on the tracks or start walking on the tracks, that's their choice.
Let Darwin sort it out.
Exactly. A few years ago, it was actually at this very crossing that was closed down, which is not anywhere near either of the stops in the town. So the train is just going through at full speed. Decided to drive through the crossing gates, and the only thing I can think of is that the person was trying to commit suicide, because it would have literally would have saved him like 20 seconds. And instead he got airlifted to Mass General Hospital. So he survived, at least as far as I know. But yeah, don't drive on the train tracks, kids. But other than that, I am enjoying a spicy watermelon daiquiri, and it is really hitting the spot.
That's a spicy watermelon.
It is. I found that using the chili infused rum in this, it just is one step better. Spicy and watermelon go well together.
So Weer'd. You know what doesn't go well together?
What's that?
Red flag laws and the NDAA.
Yes.
The National Defense Authorization Act. And before we get into this, and there's a lot to unpack, and it's awful. I want to bring us down memory lane. 10 years ago, there was, so the NDAA has to be signed into law every year, and it, among other things, is what allows the military forces to get their budgets. And so, on the face of things, the NDAA needs to be signed. But there's a nasty habit of sneaking really awful other laws into the NDAA as part of an omnibus because, God forbid we should ever have line item veto. And so the thinking goes, the NDAA must pass, so we'll try and shove these really awful things in there. 10 years ago, in 2011, you may not remember this, Weer'd, but I do, and that was when the NDAA codified that indefinite military detention without charge or trial could happen to American citizens.
I do remember that.
Yeah, and yeah. So I mean that's old news. To a certain extent, it did get modified, but it still exists, and it's how people have disappeared. And while I'm certain that for the most part it's used to disappear terrorists into CIA black sites and things like that, the point remains is that it can be used on American citizens because there's this whole domestic terrorism thing. So that's not what this main topic is about. I'm just reminding you of awful things that have happened in the past. And hey, it's time for another NDAA, and more bad things have happened because this time they're trying to shove ERPO into it. Isn't that delightful?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is, at least at the time of this recording, this isn't getting a whole ton of coverage, and I'm kind of curious on why not.
This is my shocked face, Weer'd.
Yeah. But yeah, it's snuck in, and this is a totally a bipartisan thing, and it's really despicable. I mean, there really should be there should be a law that says that you can't just start putting all sorts of laws within other laws and make things like, we talk so much about the Hughes Amendment, but it's one of those, like, that's part of like a bigger law, but all we really talk about mostly is the amendment, especially since the Firearms Owner Protection Act is mostly a law that is only honored in places that wasn't going to do anything to you in the first place. So yeah, we get like these amendments and line items and things like that go through that are just it's underhanded, especially with the the things like defense spending and things like that are like Republican love child, and they'll roll in like some Planned Parenthood funding or stuff like that in there, and then also different health fundings and things like that. The Democrats are in love with. The Republicans will drop a little line in here or there, and it's purelish. But yes, this essentially is a red flag law. I don't think there's a super duper anything different than your standard issue red flag. It does.
Aha!
Okay.
I beg to differ, sir.
Okay.
While I'm not familiar with every single red flag law on the books, for the most part, you can challenge them more or less immediately. You may have to jump through some hoops, but you can begin jumping through the hoops immediately. So this red flag law specifically addresses members of the armed forces because, Defense Act. And it's got, all the usual bad things. You can charge someone with this. Well, I'm sorry, you can't charge them. You can affect them with this. You can take away their guns without charging them or even accusing them of a crime. But I find that this really differs is that the subject of this red flag order doesn't even have a chance to begin addressing this, to provide any evidence on their behalf for up to 30 days after the court order is issued.
Mm-hmm.
So, we've got people who have signed a blank check to the nation that they will do what it takes to defend us, including giving up their lives, and that they've given up a whole bunch of rights, such as free speech while in uniform, and a whole lot of others. And now, well, we're just going to add this on top, and we can red flag them, and they can't do anything about it for a month. Because why not?
And of course, here's the time where I get up on my soapbox and point out the fact that there is just nothing good about a red flag law. It is literally one of the dumbest laws on earth, because even when it is enacted perfectly, even when it is not being abused and it is rife for abuse, this is something that, an ex-wife or a jilted girlfriend or an angry coworker, I've been threatened with red flag laws. I have no idea if the person who threatened me has attempted to put it through, but and got laughed away because they're insane. But someone who just doesn't like my activism has threatened to red flag law me because I live in Massachusetts. But even if it's not being abused, how this law works is someone is identified to be a danger to themselves or others, and law enforcement comes in and locks up their guns and leaves them free. So if you have a stalker who is threatened to kill you, the police come to the stalker. They take away all their guns. All their guns they can find. And then they leave. If somebody is contemplating suicide and you call in a red flag, the police will come in and take their guns away and then leave them alone and violated. And it only makes matters worse. There's nothing about a red flag law that will make things better. It will only anger, enrage, and or further depress somebody who is in a bad place in their life. And we already have laws in effect where if somebody is in fact a danger to themselves or others, you can have an emergency court injunction where they will go before a judge and the judge will say you are being accused of being a danger. And you can say, I am not. And then a psychologist will examine you. And if they feel that you are a danger, you can be involuntarily committed. If they feel that you are not a danger, then they will let you go. So someone can make an accusation and it's a pain in the butt, but at no point are you guilty until you are declared that way by a court of law. And that's how our system is supposed to work.
I do want to point out that in addition to every state having civil commitment laws, the military has them too. Mm-hmm. So, again, this isn't a problem. We already have ways to deal with people who are possibly a threat to themselves or to other people. Mm-hmm. This is just one more notch towards the Stasi state.
Correct. And again, this is just simply an anti-gun bill dressed up in mental health clothing. That's all it is. It's just the same old. Does it harass? Does it annoy? Does it make the lives of gun owners worse? Cool, we like it. Pass it. And then it's just under the guise of helping out people due to mental health issues. And like I said, it'll only exacerbate that. And that's when it's working perfectly. And then furthermore, again, this can be done by a jilted lover. This can be done by someone who doesn't like you. This can be done by someone who's just anti-military and they're just going to go up and down. They see somebody at the local eatery picking up meals while they're in uniform. They'll just read their name tape and just call it in. That could happen. And I don't think there's any recourse in this law for false accusations. I mean,
why would there be
accusations? So it's just, you're just calling it a red flag law. It is literally just a blunt instrument that does nothing good and causes a whole lot of strife and turmoil. And again, we've got a major issue with suicide in the military. It's a big problem. And so now you've got someone who maybe called and confided in a friend or somebody else about them really, really thinking long and hard about taking their own life. And they maybe, because they've heard the propaganda and believed it, said, oh, well, we've got these, these ERPOs. We've got this extreme risk protection order. I will protect my friend and make sure that all their guns get taken away. And like I said, the police will come in and they will search their apartment or house for all the guns, and they will pack them all up, and then they will leave because they're not charging them with a crime. They're not arresting them. They're not holding them. They're not putting them in for observation or commitment. No, they are just simply taking the guns and locking the guns up. And that person's left alone with all their pills and all their booze and their car and their ropes and their belts and their shoelaces and all the other things that someone can commit suicide with. And it's just it. And they've also been violated. They've also had their apartment ransacked with the police looking for their stuff. So yeah, this is terrible. You know, if you're not me and you have a senator or a congressperson who's not horrendously anti-gun, might be worth giving a call. Seeing what we can do about this, because this is not a good thing.
So while we're on the topic of not good things, because it's gonna be that kind of episode.
Yeah.
California.
Yep. Speaking of people who want to violate you. So California is well known for treating gun owners like petty criminals, and treating petty criminals, not too bad. And so we have, they do have their 3 strikes, which, okay. But yeah, they have it where you need a license to, actually, no, you don't need a license to own a gun in California, but you need a license for a lot of use of guns in California. And they have an ammo registry. So therefore you need to put in all your pertinent information every time you buy ammo and submit to a background check. Hence why Nevada is selling a lot of ammo to outer state Californians, because they don't care. But yeah, now there is a new bill that got signed into law by Gavin Newsom, who survived his recall, that allows this information to be shared with, let me get the wording just right, for really it's essentially to any accredited university specifically for the study of prevention of violence. So there's a whole bunch of rules here, so let's not go too far. I've seen both for the last story we've talked about and this story that really made kind of a sky is falling sort of argument. Like I heard Goa put out a tweet talking about how, all these Republican senators voted for a red flag law, and it gave the impression that it was a widespread national red flag law, which it affects the military, and I'm not scoffing at them, but it doesn't affect, if you are not currently in the service, it does not affect you. And California does have some rules on how the data can be handled, and that the personal and private information should not be published as part of the quote unquote research that's being done for this. But at the same time, chain of command is a real thing, or chain of possession. And so, the fact that this can go anywhere, and furthermore, it could go out of the state of California. We have the Michael Bloomberg School of Public Health as part of the Johns Hopkins University. They can request all of this information, and they are not beholden to California law. In theory, California could say, oh, well, fine, we're going to remove your accreditation per the dissemination of this information, but which God, it would sound like I'm singing a song here. But in fact, would California have too much of a problem if the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health decided to publish, say, a map of where all the people who are buying ammo or buying guns are, or some sort of like, oh, these these following people bought ghosts guns in the state of California, because that, I believe, that's one of the items that would that goes into this database.
What I find interesting in terms of rampant hypocrisy is that this law is a direct violation of the California Constitution, which states, Article 1, Section 1, all people are by nature free and independent and have inalienable rights. Among these are list of things, and at the end, privacy. In fact, the California Constitution names privacy as a fundamental right of all Californians 5 times. But they're gun owners. They're not really people.
Yeah. Those people.
Yeah. But that is the basis by which the California Rifle and Pistol Association has not just protested, but I don't know if they've filed suit yet, but they've definitely made it clear that they are going to sue, and they're going to sue under the basis that it violates the California Constitution and the various privacy clauses. So that'll be interesting.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, when you look at it, I mean, there's a really good chance it'll be thrown out, but it'll take time, it'll take money, and the law will probably pass before it gets thrown out, so the damage will be done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, the only thing I could think about is while I was researching this is imagining, picturing me back in the lab at the University of Maine working on my my senior research thesis, and in theory, just some 21-year-old liberal arts major who's studying gun violence could get a hold of all of this information. And there was, and again, it's the chain of custody of this information is, I think, the whole point is there may be rules that say that all this private and personal information can't be published, but it's going to be disseminated. It can be acquired and looked through, so they can look to see where your individual address is. They can look to see your full name. They can look to see if there's familial relationship. There's all sorts of data points that could be gathered from this, but they're going to be there. And another story that it reminded me of was that there was a major news story where I believe it was just an intern at the Massachusetts General Hospital had brought home some work to do at home, and what they had brought back was I believe it was test results, and to make it further salacious, it was AIDS test results. So it was patients' names and whether they were HIV positive or HIV negative, and this person brought the files home with them so they could, I don't know if they were entering it into a database or what they were doing with it, but they brought it home for official business, and the file got left on the red line.
No.
And as far as I know, it never resurfaced. I've never heard of a story of anybody getting blackmailed or anything like that. So it probably just got thrown away. But that was a big deal. Is suddenly that information was no longer private. It was out there, and anybody could know it. So, yeah, this is again the idea that someone could just have it. You could even have a super duper level-headed, benevolent person just studying gun violence and gun owners and how the purchase and sales of firearms go, and they've got a roommate that's really got an axe to grind, and there'd be nothing stopping them from, while the person's there, for them to take all the information and sell it to Michael Bloomberg or to CSGV. And of course also Michael Bloomberg can get his hands on this because he owns a university. So yeah, this is, on its face, not necessarily a terrible law, but it's a terrible law. And, and
I don't know. I'm prepared to fight you on that. On its face, it's a terrible law.
I mean, there's a reason why we have the Tiahart Amendment out there that essentially just made it illegal federally for groups to get into any of the gun and gun crime databases that are there, and only law enforcement with a valid case number can access those databases for that exact reason. And of course, we've had newspapers that have published concealed carry maps and things like that. And there's even been talk one of the bills that got pushed early on and thankfully went nowhere, never went anywhere out of committee in the Senate, but was literally a national searchable database for gun owners. And yeah, what do you think that's for?
I'm sure it's only for cake and birthday cards.
Yes, exactly. No, it's a shopping list for robbers and a list for stalkers, and probably also for if you're a super duper anti-gun activist, you could look up to see if any of your kids' friends at school own guns, and you can shun them because that's what we need to do. Well, the suit going through, I got to say the one thing about California is California has some really, really good pro-gun groups, and they're not going to pull any punches, and they're going to be going for multiple avenues to make sure that this does as little damage as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to be keeping a careful eye on this because this is something that Pink Pistols would really be interested in, because, hey, you're going to forcibly out someone? Gosh, why would we ever have a problem with that?
Yeah. And it also dips into the whole, trans thing as well, because the person may have a different legal name than their public persona. So this also could be a way of cross-referencing that.
Yep.
Oh, Gary in accounting, it's listed as Shannon here.
Well,
shall we talk about a little bit of a nicer damage mitigation?
Oh, sure. Yeah, let's have the sherbet to cleanse the palate.
Yes.
Pun not intended, because I don't make jokes about my name. And then we'll be ready for that headlong rush right into the brick wall.
I mean, there's always that. But yes, we always talk about safe gun handling when we're on the range. But what about kids and when they're off the range? Xander brings us his independent thoughts on gun safety and kids.
Welcome to Independent Thoughts with yours truly, Xander Opal. Kids and guns is a subject that anti-gunners focus on heavily. It is something that is as much a part of life as swimming pools and roads. Both these things are also dangerous to untrained children. Tragedy happens when parents don't take the time to train children about the dangers around them if they're careless. We teach kids to look both ways before crossing the street, to use crosswalks, and to stay close with their parent or guardian, to not play in traffic. Infants as young as 6 months can be taught to roll onto their back and float in water. Many parents teach children to swim as soon as they can. Why doesn't gun safety get the same attention? The Eddie Eagle program is one of the best things the NRA has done. That sort of training and reinforcement, just like the care around cars, should be widespread and reinforced. The closest thing I know of to that is an episode of the Gargoyles cartoon in the early 90s where a character played with a gun and put another character in the hospital, and was on crutches for an episode or two after. In addition, as I got into the firearms community, I began to think about what kinds of toys to give to nieces and nephews. I don't want to undermine how parents bring up their kids, but rather respect their wishes. I also don't want to unintentionally give a child a mixed message, and not realize the kid won't realize the difference between a sufficiently realistic toy and the real thing. Most kids in most circumstances will understand. I know of one, though, who doesn't yet seem to understand the concept of being careful while playing. Overall, it's a bit like Mike Rowe's Safety Third. Relying on other people to be safe is foolish. Think things through and work to create a safer environment for those around you. Lastly, kids pay more attention to what you do than what you say. It is best to set a good example. Have fun, be safe, and I hope I gave you something to think about.
This was too short. I mean, this was like, God, Xander, minimal effort here.
Yeah, I mean, it was short. It was short and sweet. But it's a good point. I mean, especially
It's a great point that needed to be further developed.
That's true. Well, we could develop a little bit more into it. I'll say right,
Xander, you slack ass. Yes, go on.
Yeah, I mean, I am all for firearms safety being taught at all grades of public school. This is not a propaganda thing. This is, look, if you are either staunchly anti-gun, guns are awful, you are the person. I had friends in elementary school whose parents took their rifles and pistols away from their GI Joes, so you can play with the GI Joes, but they couldn't have their guns. And I will also note that these friends are the ones that taught me that if you pull back the head of a Pez dispenser, the little base plate goes back down inside the Pez dispenser body, and you can put a magic marker in there, and it makes an excellent rocket launcher. So yeah, go ahead and take your kids' guns away. Trust me, they'll find sticks and crayons and pieces of paper, and they'll make a whole bunch of guns. But yeah, if you're the person that like takes away all your kids' toy guns and doesn't let them play with guns, or you're just someone who just you're a fence sitter on the Second Amendment, and you think both sides have valid arguments, and you personally don't own any guns, so you don't need to teach your kids gun safety. Your kids aren't only going to live in your house. You're not locking them up in the tower like Rapunzel. Those kids are going to go out and play in other places, and they may encounter other guns, whether they be legal or illegal guns. There have been a bunch of cases in Massachusetts where, and it's almost always the illegal guns. Someone's a drug dealer, and they've got a stolen gun tucked somewhere in their room, and the kids go and play there. It's never a good scene. But if the kids know about firearms, they will go. They won't be like, oh, look at this. Oh, maybe it's a toy. It's a real gun. Oh, this is interesting. Let's play around with it. The education needs to be there. Like we teach our kids about, stranger danger and don't let people touch you in their bathing suit area. It's not because we're, into molesting and sexualizing kids. No, so if this happens, and we're going to do everything we can to prevent this from happening, but that's not how we do this. It's not all the kids that are molested didn't deserve it or anything like that. Predators will sometimes find your kids, and you teach them to be safe around that, and teach them that is not right, and that they should come and talk to you or to talk to a trusted adult and tell them what happened so that we can bring these jerks to justice. Same thing goes with guns. Kids are going to encounter guns. We're a heavily armed society. I live in Massachusetts, and I own guns. We just talked about California. They wouldn't be passing these crazy laws if they didn't have any gun owners there. So even if you live in California, you're going to encounter gun owners. Even if you live in Massachusetts, you're going to encounter gun owners. And if you live in Maine and Montana and North Carolina and all of the other states that are perfectly free and don't care about, preventing people from owning guns, just get your background check. You can legally own the gun. Your kids are going to encounter guns. And so teach your kids gun safety. And there's some links in the show notes for some great safety stuff for kids.
Okay, that was refreshing. And now back to the suck. Because Weer'd is here to Fisk, the anti-gun movie, The Price of Freedom, now brought to you by CNN, that bastion of liberty.
Back in episode 164, I did an audio Fisk of the trailer for the anti-NRA movie, The Price of Freedom. It was only released in a handful of theaters, and at the time, the only way to see the movie was to pay for screening rights and have your own private showing. Well, now CNN has bought the rights to the movie, and are even calling it a CNN film, which seems odd since they only bought the film after its release. They aired it on CNN at the end of August, and unless you have cable or subscribe to Slingbox, you can't watch it. So yeah, I still haven't seen this movie, and honestly, I doubt many others have either. But in promoting this film, CNN's Laura Jarrett did an interview with the film's director, Judd Ehrlich, where we get a little more insight on the making of this piece of anti-gun propaganda.
One of the things that I found so challenging and frustrating about watching it is being reminded of how many times in our history we've been at something of a crossroads when it comes to actually doing something about gun violence, and how at each of those inflection points, if you will, it seemed as though nothing changed.
What are you talking about? There are currently 21 constitutional carry states. We repealed the federal assault weapons ban. Castle doctrine and stand your ground laws are fairly widespread. And while we're having a bit of a spike in violent crime currently, we're still at very low levels historically. Oh, wait, you mean you want to ban guns and you really don't care about the results? I see how this interview is going to go.
That was really the question that I began with. How did we get here? How did we get to a place in America where gun violence is so prevalent, where there's so many guns in our society, and yet so few gun laws? And the American people want some type of regulation, both gun owners and non-gun owners alike, Republicans and Democrats. And yet we don't have that kind of regulation in this country.
This is Michael Moore's style of documentary, which is frequently derided by traditional documentarians. Traditionally, a documentarian starts with a question, and through the course of the filming, they tell the story of the question. And sometimes they find an answer, or sometimes they find more questions. But they always leave the process more educated on the issue, and they pass that experience on to the viewers. Michael Moore broke that mold with his documentaries, where he started with a question and the answer he wanted, and this answer didn't even need to be correct. He would then shoot a documentary using selection bias to find the subject most willing to tell the narrative he wanted and remove any contrary information in the editing booth. For Second Amendment activists, the film you're probably thinking about is Bowling for Columbine, which was entirely a work of fiction. And Matt Stone of South Park fame was so pissed off at how dishonestly Michael Moore represented him in the film, as well as copied the South Park animation style to make it appear that Stone worked on the production team of Moore's film, that he created a hyper-unflattering Michael Moore puppet for his hilarious puppet comedy Team America World Police. And man, the director's starting position is so illogical that he starts from a point where this country has no gun laws and that the average person wants more gun control. Wow.
And when you dug just a little bit deeper, all of those roads led to the NRA. And that's really where this began.
Oh, wait, you're being serious? This shows the level of selection bias here. The film was shot and released at literally the NRA's darkest hour, and yet still a time when the common narrative of anti-gun activism is that of frustration. Yet they made the documentary about what a massive boogeyman the NRA is.
How did you get people to open up and talk to you for this film? Because in watching it, it struck me, Gabby Giffords, Lucy McBath, all these people who've been so deeply and personally affected by gun violence in their lives.
Oh, wow. How did you get anti-gun lobbyists who are all on the payroll of Michael Bloomberg to speak in a film funded by the Giffords anti-gun lobby? I'm really more curious on how Giffords produced a video supporting their employee David Chipman for the director of the ATF, yet they couldn't manage to get a sit-down glamour shot interview with Chipman himself.
Have you received any pushback from the NRA? It's a pretty unflinching look at a pretty powerful group that I think is, a pretty clear-eyed view of their influence in this whole situation.
The answer is not yet.
The NRA barely even spoke out against David Chipman for ATF director. And they were completely silent on the 2019 Virginia midterm elections that brought in a wave of anti-gun politicians and anti-gun bills into a state where the NRA is headquartered. And let's be honest, the people who actually have seen this film before CNN aired it is likely numbered in the thousands. And I really doubt CNN increased those numbers very much. So it's not like it's a very big target.
There's a history of gun reform and gun laws in this country dating back to our founding.
This gets brought up every time the movie is mentioned, and it simply isn't true. At the time of the founding of this country, you could own warships, cannons, arsenals of modern muskets, as well as repeating arms like the puckle gun and the Girandoni air rifle. The only thing that could be considered gun control is that blacks and natives were often prohibited from owning guns. And that wasn't even because they were restricted. They just weren't considered people at the time. Oh, but modern gun control also disproportionately disarms people of color and people of lower economic status. So yeah, do you really want to stand up for that?
The NRA used to be, for almost a century, about marksmanship, about the shooting sports, about hunting, about conservation, about positive aspects of gun culture.
The NRA was founded by Union generals disappointed at the shooting skills of the Union Army compared to that of the Southern rebels they faced. The NRA was a paramilitary group designed to increase those skills through hunting and competition. Honestly, it lost its way around the Great Depression when the anti-gun laws like the National Firearms Act were passed, and firearm ownership suddenly became synonymous with hunting, sporting, and agriculture, and not personal and national defense.
Before they turned into a really radical organization that did everything they could to associate firearms with this notion of what it means to be free, what it means to be American, what it means to have personal liberty in this country. And it doesn't need, firearms don't need to be associated with those things.
Said at the time of questioning the place of police in our society, discussion of racial biases, massive riots that show a breakdown of lawful society. And we can see brutal lockdowns for modern first world nations, and the disarmed populace of those nations have zero recourse. That's pretty tone deaf right there.
Did you know going into making this film? Because I have to tell you, like, I went to law school and I learned a lot from this film about just our gun laws and how things sort of developed again in each of the states.
This is why, if you carry a gun for self-defense, you should strongly consider getting a policy with USCCA or ACLDN, because this shows the competence you can expect from a public defender if you're ever charged with murder or assault when you've legally had to defend your life.
I mean, so much of the film was revelatory to me, and I hope to audiences and people like yourself watching it.
If anything was revelatory to him, he made sure to cut it from the film. There is no doubt in my mind this film is as real as reality television.
And we saw that in the summer of 2020. We saw Kyle Rittenhouse. We saw people taking arms into state houses. We saw plots against governors. We saw all of this, and we were all living it.
The Kyle Rittenhouse shooting was heavily documented, and from everything I saw, it was a clean shoot. There are lessons to be learned, but I don't think Kyle is guilty of murder or assault. As for citizens taking weapons to state capitals, who cares? Was anybody hurt? Were laws being broken? I'm sorry our freedoms make you feel uncomfortable. And there was only one plot against a governor that I know of, and that was entirely fabricated and led by the FBI for the purposes of causing political fear in the people, much like the purpose of this alleged documentary.
Opinion polls don't matter. That what matters is who gets out there and votes. And it's very simple. And, you know, I think embedded in your question is that we all know people who are willing to voice their opinions and believe strongly in ideals and may believe strongly in gun control. But the reality is, if you don't do something about it, it doesn't matter. So if you don't vote, it doesn't matter.
This is a great point on both sides. While lots of people may say they support gun control, the number of people who care enough about this issue to actually take any sort of action is very small. The same can't be said about gun owners. Hence why the NRA can be in shambles, but still gun control activists can't seem to get the upper hand. That being said, this goes both ways. I mentioned the 2019 midterm election in Virginia. That was a huge loss for the Second Amendment because Michael Bloomberg picked some strong candidates and gun owners didn't show up to oppose him. So even though I say we have the upper hand, we're still in a nation flooded with horrible gun laws and people who want to make them worse.
That even if the NRA were to end tomorrow, there are so many folks out there that when this bell is rung, that this slippery slope bell, that your Second Amendment rights are going to be taken away from you if any type of gun reform, no matter how benign, is passed. Folks are going to come out and do what they need to do to make sure that no gun reform is passed.
What never gets asked of anti-gun activists in these interviews is, what law is too much? I've had a chance to ask that to anti-gun activists on many an occasion. They rarely answer me. The bottom line is, the people who are motivated to restrict our rights do want to strip them all from us. They don't see a hunting gun or a target pistol as any more of a valid firearm than a machine gun or a nuclear bomb. They don't want May-issue concealed carry. They want firearms carry banned. For everybody but their private security, of course. It isn't even a slippery slope. It's a game of incrementalism. They ban your AR-15 so they can take your pump shotgun next. They allow you to carry so long as you pay an extra fee and take an extensive class. Only until they can close the permitting office entirely. We need to play this game. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Don't knock the repeal of a May-issue carry law because it doesn't go directly to constitutional carry. And don't knock an assault weapons repeal just because it doesn't also roll back the magazine ban. We move the ball down the field so we can have the position to make the next play. A strong offense can be a great defense. The Second Amendment community is great at defense, but we're pretty poor on the political attack. Maybe someday I'll be able to watch this film. Until then, those are your anti-gun talking points and a few rebuttals to combat them.
Oh, jeez. I'm starting to lose the capacity to express myself in words, and I'm just kind of reduced to animal noises. Just.
I mean, I gotta say, the more I dive into this, the more I really want to see this film, because I'm even starting to wonder, is it as bad as they're making it out to be? Because boy, this is clearly a film that is just going for the jugular, pulling no punches, and not letting a single ounce of truth or fact get in the way. And I especially want to see the bits with David Keane in it, because especially after he got hit by Manuel Oliver in that little scam. I wonder, number one, how much he's in the film, and number two, how hacked up his, obviously his, I'm sure the film is 2 hours or less long, and every single interview, they interviewed them for over 2 hours. So everybody's interview is hacked to pieces. But I got to wonder how much David Keane's talking points were just completely shredded until they no longer resembled anything he had actually said.
Well, Weer'd, once again, that's the difference between you and me. You actively seek out boots to the crotch, and I say, no thank you. So, yeah, I'm sure you're going to be able to watch it at some point. I wouldn't be surprised if it makes it to Amazon Prime sooner rather than later. But, if I can find it on DVD, I'll send it to you for Christmas.
Oh, that's awful sweet of you, Aaron. I think a 24-hour Amazon rental would be more than sufficient. I did sit through Miss Sloane, and it was a record-breaking box office bomb for a reason. I believe it's still free on Amazon Prime, and it was never going to appear in an ACP film track because I won't subject the staff of ACP to that turd.
Yeah, Weer'd. I think we're done here.
All right. Well, it's time for us to thank our listeners. Not just our supporters on Patreon, but every single one of our listeners. But we especially thank those supporters on Patreon. And of course, if you don't know, you can become a Patreon patron. Go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers podcast to sign up. Patrons get an early release of the podcast, plus bonus content like the hilarious blooper reels, the aforementioned ACP film tracks, and the ACP Mag Dump.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends both online and off.
You can get more from me at my blog, which is weerdworld.com. That's weerdworld.com. And you can hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
And you can find me at all the usual places. Nothing has changed. Do you even listen this far? I don't think you do.
If they don't, they're missing out, because I'm going to thank Nate Spencer for our music, and then Aaron's going to really do something amazing.
Well, he's all whereas I am yeah. Our onomatopoeia is assorted, and so is our podcast. Good night, everybody.
That is thoroughly accurate. Good night. Oh my god, that sounded so good.